truly believe in the magic.
What's up, Magic fans? I'm Mikey, and welcome to this week's episode of Penny for Your Thoughts, the Orlando Magic UK podcast. Today is Saturday, the 4th of June, 2022. I'm really happy to have our friend Paul back this week, who's had a few rough weeks, but it's great to have you back on, mate.
Yeah, mate, thank you. It's brilliant to be back. I was due to be back on last week, and Gary, thanks for stepping in last minute for me. Everybody knows that I lost my mum 2 weeks ago today. It has been a rough period, which she'd been in hospital 3 weeks prior to that as well, on and off. So it's been a rough 5 weeks. And I've got to say, everybody, thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart. I know I've put it out on Twitter. I know it's on Facebook, on the Orlando Magic UK site. But the support and love, incredible. Thank you.
Well, we'll send you a love, mate. It's great to have you back on.
Thank you.
No worries. And we've got Gary with us this week. Geraint's on holiday. He's taken over the role of Calamity this week. He can tell you about that next week. He's been making trips to the nurse on holiday this week. So I'll leave that till next week for him to tell you. But Gary, how are you, mate?
All good. I'm just obviously stepping in for the Cardiff Cosma, so I'll do my best. But I won't. I'm not in the season, so there'll be no referent.
Absolutely. And this week, go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask you, Gary, how was the trip to Wembley? Absolutely
brilliant, mate. I like the fact that going to Wembley now and having this, shall we say, the pre-match takeover of Trafalgar is now universally known as doing a Sunderland, even in our
yeah. Congratulations on the promotion.
Yeah,
Paul.
Thank you. Just got buyouts happening next, apparently. Takeover.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Long overdue, mate. Long overdue. Well, we need to congratulate our guest on promotion as well. Philip's a big Fulham fan. So next season we can have some banter with Paul's Leeds and my Liverpool teams next year. So it's good to see Fulham back in the Premier League, Phil.
Yes, absolutely. It was a heck of a season for my boys. Nice to cheer for a winning team, and of course now that it'll be an odd numbered year, we'll have a really bad season. We'll be back down in the championship. That's how it goes apparently.
Excellent. Well, no, it's definitely Fulham deserved to go up. They were outstanding, and I'm interested to see what Fabio Carvalho is going to be like for Liverpool this season. So good signing. So this week we are joined by the site editor and expert for OrlandoMagicDaily.com and host of the Locked On Magic podcast, Philip Rossman-Reich, or AKA, as Jonathan from the Sixth Man Show called you the other week, the Podfather, which has to stick. You need to change your Twitter handle to the Podfather now, Phil, I think.
I might have to, especially with the work I've been doing on the podcast the last week. I will gladly accept that title. If only I just have to make sure I get the respect and the permission to use that title from the Godfather himself, Evan Dunlap, the original writer for Third Quarter Collapse and Orlando Pinstripe Post. I know Evan does not like that I call him the Godfather, but he has to take that title nonetheless.
Yeah, mate, you've got to change it. Absolutely. So let's dive into a bit of Magic news. Yesterday, it was announced by Adrian Wojnarowski that the Orlando Magic executive Matt Lloyd will be leaving to become the senior vice president of basketball operations for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Matt Lloyd spent 10 seasons with the Magic. How big of a misfill is he going to be for Jeff Weltman and John Hammond?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be it's going to be big shoes to fill. I think that Jeff Weltman, he's been in the league a long time. I think that he'll be able to pick up some of the slack, as will John Hammond. But Matt Lloyd, what his role was with the team was he was in charge of the whole scouting department. So he's in charge of kind of gathering all the information, running the Magic's draft preparations, especially. Like, he's the one that kind of starts building those databases, starts like kind of getting in, consolidating scouting reports. He's the guy that, all these assistant GMs, what they do is they consolidate information. They work on their own, give the best information that they can give to Jeff Weltman, who's ultimately going to make the decisions. And that's just kind of how it works. Lloyd's obviously been part of this organization for a decade now, for 10 years. And so there's a lot of, even through 2 general managers, a lot of institutional knowledge there. There's a lot of understanding of, okay, this is, there's obviously a process that's been developed and a process that everyone feels comfortable with. But there's a lot of institutional knowledge of like, okay, this is someone I can trust to talk to about players in the Midwest, or this is someone I can trust and talk to about international players. And Lloyd's been in the league for a very, very long time. I believe his first job with the Chicago Bulls was back in 1994. He was hired full-time there in 1999. So he's been in the league and has developed contacts throughout the league, not just for college scouting, but also for pro scouting, which is also under his purview, that are really valuable to a team. I mean, I remember Rob Hennigan talking about this during the Tobias Harris trade, one of the first deals that Rob Hennigan did that first season. He said, something that I leaned on when I was deciding to target Tobias Harris, or require Tobias Harris, was information that I got directly from him, or remembering the interview that I had with him back when Hennigan was with Oklahoma City, when Harris was going through the draft process. And I'm fairly certain that there's also a database or a bank of information that the Magic had that they kept from the previous regime on Tobias Harris too. So I always joke that these front offices are like mini intelligence agencies. They're constantly gathering information, figuring out who these players are, filing it, saving it in case they need it to go out and get another player. So, Matt Lloyd, part of his job was probably like back a few years ago, was probably figuring out like, okay, Markelle Fultz is on the table here. Who is this kid really? Who is this person? And trying to figure out who he is as a player, what's going on with him as a player, when Philadelphia is certainly not going to share their secrets with anyone because they're trying to get rid of him, trying to pump up his value, trying to figure out who he is really. And I think that you do have to give someone like Matt Lloyd credit for being able to kind of decipher this information, not just for college prospects, but also for pro prospects, and having that extensive network to get that information on very quickly, consolidate and give it to the decision makers is obviously super valuable. And that's why the Magic have valued him, and why he was one of the few guys that stayed over between Rob Hennigan and now Jeff Weltman. And so I do think that it's a big loss, because you don't replace the trust, number one, and you don't replace kind of the knowledge that someone of that experience has.
When just going further on this, is there a good time for this to happen, and is this a particularly bad time for it to happen so close to the draft?
I don't think there's ever a good time for this to happen. Yeah. The only good time would be like August, September, when off season's essentially done. You're just preparing for the season, and that's kind of when that's when everyone in the NBA takes their vacations. But this is the hiring season. Tim Connolly has to get ready for his own draft with Minnesota. Yeah. And I know Minnesota doesn't have, Minnesota has a late first round pick. So they've got to prepare. They got to prepare for the draft themselves. And so this is the hiring season for executives. Tim Connolly, coming from the Denver Nuggets, he's not going to be able to bring a lot of his staff over from Denver. He's going out and grabbing guys that he likes, that he trusts. So, I made this point when the announcement was made that, yes, it's tough that you're losing someone that's been part of this organization for a long time and has been really important to this organization. But it's also good, and it says something good, that a executive of Tim Connolly's level, on a playoff caliber team in Minnesota, wants one of your guys. I'm a Northwestern fan, and Northwestern for like 8-9 years had the exact same staff, and that stability is great. At the same time, a lot of us fans were thinking like, well, we've been really successful over this last decade with the same staff, essentially. Why aren't other teams trying to poach our coaches? Why aren't other teams trying to grab our guys? That says something too, that people don't want, this is a weird business where you poach people. People don't want your people. So to me, it's somewhat of a good sign that someone did want Matt Lloyd. To the other point, is this a bad time? I really don't think so, actually. I think Matt Lloyd was actually on a podcast with Bally Sports Florida. I think it's called Mic'd Up. And he noted, I think in that podcast, that essentially the draft preparation is done. They've done all the scouting reports. They've reviewed all the film. Jeff Weltman has all the information that he needs to pick these players. Only the missing piece left in the draft process is bringing players in for an interview. And, Matt Lloyd would have been involved in those interviews, but Jeff Weltman and John Hammond, for the most part, are going to be there too. And other people within the scouting department, now we'll just have to pick up some of the slack with some of these interviews and workouts that are going on at the Amway Center. A lot of that's negotiated through Weltman anyway with agents. So I think in that sense, a lot of Lloyd's big work as far as preparing for this year's draft, a lot of his job on that was done. It's now up to Jeff Weltman, John Hammond, kind of the big decision makers, to get a feel for the players as people and begin to make their decisions that way.
Quality. Yeah, quality.
Well, before we dive into the first round pick and Jabari, Chet, Paolo specifically, Phil, take us back to the night of the lottery. It was a huge night for the Magic, obviously getting the number one pick. You were downtown at Harry Buffalo with the Sixth Man Show and the Magic's watch party. Can you tell us what it was like being there and how it felt that night to finally get something to go our way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing was, it was great to just have all these Magic fans together. It's obviously, the arena is great. And I think Magic fans have really responded to this team specifically. I think there's there's just a lot that about this team that people are really excited about. But you could just kind of sense that there was both a joy to be around each other, but also some trepidation about the lottery process. I remember talking to fans and fans were just happy to kind of have this space to come together, meet up with people. There's not a lot of us out there. So, especially the diehards, when we get a chance to really come together, it's usually pretty special. But, just talking to fans, everyone was just like, look, and I was this way too, honestly. Let's just get in the top four. If we get in the top four, if we win the lottery, that's a victory enough. We could convince ourselves into 4 or 5 guys in this draft. I told people, like, look, there are 7 guys that I'm really comfortable with in this draft. The Magic aren't necessarily going to lose here. Now, obviously, like, being the top pick is better. Having a higher pick is better. There's certainly a higher caliber of prospect, but I've always just kind of taken the take of the lottery is the lottery. You can't control it, and you just got to let it play out how it's going to play out. But I remember I was sitting next to Dante Marchitelli, and he was just remarking about how wild it was, and I told him, and I think he agreed with me. Magic fandom is just dormant. It's not gone. People still love this team. They just need a reason to come out and cheer. And you could see as the picks were being revealed, once we got to 6 and 5 and the Magic weren't there and they hit that commercial break with the top 4, everyone was just happy. Like, we all knew we won. We were somewhat playing with house money, but with each pick that was revealed after that, you could just feel the crescendo just building and everyone. And we just, none of us could believe that it actually happened for this team again. And we were talking, not to bring these things into it, because I don't think we do it for the traffic, but like we were talking about it before, your traffic's up, my traffic's up. There's a ton more interest and you could just feel the excitement about this opportunity the Magic have. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to ask you, Phil, what do you consider to be the Magic's most urgent need? And do you believe that any of these top 3 picks, the top prospects that everybody is listing, actually address that requirement?
I think the biggest need that the Magic have is a star. They need a guy that just ties this whole project together. You look at the teams that advance deep into the playoffs, they have a guy that can just get you 30 on a night when you need 30, that can just carry you deep in the playoffs, that defenses just can't stop. And I know we're talking about a team that had 22 wins and jumping all the way up to, championship contender is a long way and it's going to be a process, but you need to be building and thinking about how to build toward that team. And I look at the Magic's roster now, and there are a lot of really nice players. Franz Wagner is fantastic. Wendell Carter is fantastic. Markelle Fultz, we'll see what he looks like with a full offseason now, is fantastic. There's things to like about Jalen Suggs. There's things to like about Cole Anthony. There's things to like about guys up and down this roster. But when you look at this roster, and again, maybe this guy develops, they're still so young. The thing that they're lacking is that guy that just ties everything together. I think one of the big struggles the Magic had last year was Cole Anthony tried to be that guy, and he's been that guy his entire life. But in the NBA, he's found it a lot more difficult to kind of create his space, to get into the paint consistently, to finish at the rim consistently. He's really kind of struggled in that role. And again, he could continue to get better. We saw plenty of flashes that he can get better. But the big reason why the Magic struggled offensively is that, Cole Anthony was the leading scorer. Cole Anthony was the guy that was kind of driving the ship for most of the year. And again, that's no offense to Cole Anthony. I think he's a second-year player. He was put in a really rough situation. We saw how successful the Magic starting lineup was when they were fully healthy. So there are hints that certainly this team can continue to get better on that front. But the big thing that this team needs is they need a star. And, I think that the top three guys in this draft, the guys that most people have been talking about for this top pick, Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Paolo Banchero, all three can get to that level. Paolo Banchero is probably the closest to that level immediately. If you're looking for a short-term thing, Banchero can step in, I think, be a 20-point scorer fairly quickly. Jabari is going to need some work. And Chet, I think, he's just a unique player. They're just not players like him in the NBA. And you need that uniqueness too, to force a defense to figure out what to do with a player like him. So, I think the Magic are obviously in a really good spot here to get a really high value, high quality player to their roster that's going to help them kind of hit that next stage of their development, whatever that is.
I think because of that as well, I've said this before, that all three of those guys will really want to come to Orlando because they have that opportunity to step in and be an instant star.
Yeah, and obviously there's prestige with the number one pick too. I think in the past, the Magic have drafted guys that weren't able to come into Orlando or just didn't come in for workout. Jalen Suggs never came to Orlando. I don't believe Mo Bamba ever came to Orlando. When you're drafting fifth, agents, not that I think the Magic have a really good relationship with agents, but agents are trying to put their clients in the best position possible. And sometimes it means especially nowadays, it's kind of flipped now, where agents are, asking you to come to kind of kiss the ring almost, to kind of come to their home court, to where they're comfortable and where they control the setting. They're not going to these places or to these organizations and kind of getting the free agent tour, doing a workout, doing all those things. That was, a decade ago. That's what a lot of these top prospects were doing. They were on the circuit too. Nowadays, agents set up their pro days. That's when you see them work out. It's very controlled. And then they kind of select the teams that they want to talk with and bring in. But when you have the number one pick, I think that's very different because everyone wants to be the number one pick. So I think the Magic will get all three of those guys in Orlando here very soon.
Yeah, good times. So Phil, one thing I wanted to ask you, because everyone talks about last year's draft being one of the deepest we've seen for quite a while, with Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, and so on. Where would you rank Banchero, Smith, and Chet Holmgren in amongst last year's prospects? So if they were in last year's draft, where would you rank them in and amongst those sorts of players, just to give people a bit of context?
Yeah. So, I think that Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green and probably Evan Mobley are probably better than all three of these guys, that we're talking about, at least especially when it comes to kind of pre-draft analysis and pre-draft thinking. Last year's draft class was very, very good. If the Magic did a good job, finding the draft to have 2 first-round picks, just like kind of, unfortunately for this year's draft class, next year's draft class is already shaping up to be a very good one too. And that's another draft for the Magic are likely to have 2 first-round picks as well. At least for now, they have 2 first-round picks in that draft with the Chicago pick coming from the Nikola Vucevic trade. I think that this trio of players would slot in really, really comfortably in, maybe in the pre-draft conversation. I think Evan Mobley's probably ahead of them, but in that tier with Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs, Scotty Barnes, the players kind of in that range. So I think we're still dealing with very high level prospects here. Yeah. But I think when a lot of people think you're getting the number one pick, especially in Magic history, the Magic have gotten number one picks with sort of generational talent. They had the number one pick in the Shaq draft. Like that was everyone. The story about that draft lottery is every single team had a jersey underneath their desk with Shaq's name on it already. Like everyone knew who the number one pick was going to be. And obviously Shaq became a Hall of Famer. The next year, the Magic drafted Chris Webber. Chris Webber was far and away considered the number one prospect that year. And it was a shock to some people when they traded down for Penny. But, I've had some other podcasts kind of ask me like, hey, what would it take to trade the number one pick? And I give them the same line Pat Williams gave Don Nelson, give me 6 first-round picks. This is like, that's a joke, but this is like back then for the Chris Webber draft, that wasn't so much of a joke. That was a negotiating tactic. you're not getting 6 first-round picks. You're not getting 3 first-round picks for trading down from number 1 here. In 2004, when the Magic drafted Dwight Howard, there was a legitimate debate between Dwight Howard and Emeka Okafor, but Dwight Howard, was a lot of people said like this kid's upside's really, really high. He's going to be really good. And obviously, he's become a probable Hall of Famer off of that. This is, at least as we're sitting here today, of course, someone could surprise. There's no runaway guy here. There's a reason why we're debating between 3 players for the top pick. I think there's 3 really good cases for all 3 of these guys, to be the number 1 pick. I don't think anyone should begrudge that. And unfortunately, timing is something in this league. If it's next year's draft, it's clear who the Magic would be taking. I mentioned to you guys about this before we started recording. Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson are already guys that NBA scouts are buzzing over. They're already looking ahead to next year's draft, which, I don't like to do, but I'm an NBA guy. I focus on the NBA, but even I know who those players are. And I've watched some tape on those players and understand that it's a big draft next year. This year's draft just isn't considered. It's certainly not that deep. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the potential to trade back into the first round, but I'm struggling to figure out who the Magic would target if they did that. And this is a draft that, has very good players at the top. Don't get me wrong. These are good players. I'm not here to insult that, but these are not surefire, multi-time All-Stars, multi-time All-NBA players. These are guys that are going to need some development. There are some questions about them. They should still be very, very good, but you're not looking at we're not looking at Anthony Bennett bad, but you're not looking at kind of generational talent good either.
Philip, you mentioned before about how Banchero could come in and be almost like the 20 points per game guy out of the gate. If you were projecting a little bit further and you were given a choice between, say, Banchero and Jabari, who had seen as the 2 big scorers of this draft, who would you go for on scoring ability for the Magic as a longer term?
In the longer term, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's still really hard to project because there's still a lot about Jabari's game that we don't know, and there's a lot of questions I think about how best to use how much more Jabari can grow and develop. Right now, like Paolo Banchero, you can dump him the ball in the mid post, the low post. He'll get you a basket. He can be kind of an ISO scorer. I think his 3-point shot is a lot better than he's shown. I think he'll continue to improve on that. And that's obviously kind of a big thing for him kind of taking that next step up. But my question with Paolo Banchero is, okay, if he's not that starring player, what is he doing? How much better can he be? He's already a pretty good passer. I think he's a lot better a passer than people give him credit for. And so there's all the ingredients for him to be a star. Like I kind of compare him a lot to Carmelo Anthony in his play style and in his body type as well. I don't think he's as good of a scorer as Carmelo was at Syracuse in college. But he's very much of that ilk. And so the question that I've kind of flipped the question around on a lot of people is, with these 3 players, it's not about which player you like the best. It's more about what team do you actually want to build. What kind of team should the Magic be? And if they want to be, here's our pivot, here's our central pivot scorer, Paolo Banchero's your guy. If they want to be more of a team that has a little bit more free flowing offense, if they want to be a team that has, just this great floor spacer, this defensive minded group, Jabari Smith is probably more their guy. And that's why I think the Magic are probably leaning closer toward Jabari Smith. I've taken to comparing Jabari a lot to Rashard Lewis. He's got Seattle Rashard Lewis's athleticism with Orlando Rashard Lewis's shooting, which is a really dangerous mix for defense. He's a fantastic defender. He should be an NBA level defender right when he steps on the floor. He is a great 3-point shooter. He had some big 3-point scoring bursts. But the way Auburn used him didn't really showcase what more he could do. He led that team in field goal attempts per game, but a lot of 3-pointers, a lot of catch and shoot 3-pointers. And so the question I think that a lot of scouts have about Jabari, and I think they see that he can get there. It's just a matter of getting practice with it and getting better at it. Is can he create separation and create his own shot? And I think that's really the big question, because I made that Rashard Lewis comparison. Rashard Lewis is a great player, 2-time All-Star, Orlando Magic legend, will be an Orlando Magic Hall of Famer sooner than later. But Rashard Lewis isn't the guy you build your team around, if that makes sense. And so if you want to make this a draft where you get that central star, I understand the questions about Jabari. Now, having said that, I don't think we saw everything Jabari could do. I think that the way Auburn played, the way that they kept the ball in their guards' hands a lot, kind of set Jabari up to only showcase that shooting ability rather than his potential for driving and creating his own shot. So I think there's plenty of room for him to grow. And he's, of course, as always, all these kids are 19 years old. They're going to get better.
That's an excellent answer, and it's a funny one because I think I'm just like every other Magic fan right now. Where it depends what hour of the day.
Yep.
That's the questions who I like, and Banchero is the one who intrigues me the most out of the three. Is just because I don't know actually where his ceiling is. I think his floor is probably Randall, but I think his ceiling could be a lot higher.
He could be really, really good. I mean, I've been very in on Banchero. I remember tweeting this and I bring this story up a lot. When I really got kind of bought into Banchero was in the NCAA tournament against Arkansas. Duke was up big that entire game throughout the entire first half. They kind of jumped out to a big lead. And in the middle of the second half, Arkansas brought the lead back down to 5. And Duke essentially, they needed a basket just to stop the bleeding. And so for 2 straight possessions, they dumped the ball into Banchero in the low post. They cleared out for him. And so in a big moment when Duke needed a basket, they couldn't afford not to score, they turned to a freshman more than anything else. They turned to a freshman to give them a basket. He scored 2 baskets, brought it back out to a 9-point lead. Duke went on to win easily from there. This was about the 6-7 minute mark of the second half. And that game was over. Once Banchero hit those 2 shots, they got 2 stops. It was over. Like Arkansas wasn't going to threaten them the rest of the game. So to me, it's not everything, but it does say something that in clutch moments, that's the guy that Coach K trusted more than anyone else. Like Coach K said, we need a basket. Just go get us a basket. That's obviously the biggest thing the Magic have been missing for 15, 20 years now. It feels like.
Absolutely. And you mentioned as well when you were talking about trading down in the draft and a team that's meant to be rumored to be shopping their picks, the Sacramento Kings. And I was just wondering, do you think there's anywhere where the Magic would look at that pick and what would it take to get that from Sacramento?
Yeah, I actually, I've been sort of toying with the idea of trading back up into that 4th pick and trying to sneak back. I've been thinking about this a lot because, obviously the Magic had, or not obviously, it's kind of slipped under the radar, but according to Kobe Price, the Orlando Magic, or of the Orlando Sentinel, the Orlando Magic interviewed Keegan Murray of Iowa earlier this week. And it has been no secret that the Orlando Magic like Keegan Murray. I remember John Hammond did a radio spot in Orlando here on 96.9 The Game right after Markelle Fultz came back. And the interviewer, asked him a lot about Fultz and what it meant to have Fultz back. And the interviewer at one point, I think, asked John Hammond, how did you feel watching him play? And John Hammond John Hammond's the loosest lips in the entire organization. Kind of let slip that, actually I wasn't at the Amway Center. I really wish I could have been. I was on a scouting trip. I was in Iowa watching a prospect. And so it doesn't take long to figure out who they were watching that day. And so the Magic interviewed Keegan Murray at the draft combine. They brought him in for an interview. He's not considered a top pick. He's a very good player. He checks off a lot of boxes that Orlando likes. But I don't think that he's not of the same caliber of prospect as the 3 guys that we're talking about. So could the Magic trade up trade up or down to get to 4 and take Keegan Murray? I think the Magic are open to and listening to everything. I think that they need to consolidate some players for sure. I think that they have a really full roster and they need to figure out, okay, who do we actually want to build around? Who are the guys that we really want to build around? How do we make them better? And then how do we kind of fill out our roster so that we can achieve our goals this year, whether that is making the playoffs, making the play-in tournament, or if it's just kind of general progression and improvement. I'm a big believer that in the draft, you go get your guy. If the Magic really like who they have at 1, and then they really want Keegan Murray, there isn't, I think there is a cost. You don't want to overpay for someone like that, but trading a future pick. I wouldn't trade a pick in next year's draft, but trading a future pick. You've got those 2 second-round picks that you probably don't want to use. That's not part of the general joke about the Magic using second-round picks. You have guys like Terrence Ross that you probably don't have much use for anymore. You have a lot of players that duplicate skills that aren't, and young players especially, that aren't going to be able to find the same minutes next year. You do have to start thinking about, okay, how do we actually build a functioning roster? You don't want to, I agree, you don't want to ruin the vibes, but you definitely explore some things. So, I don't think the Magic I don't think eventually the Magic climbed that high, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are discussions and they are exploring some things.
This is one that I want to ask. It's going to kind of build on the answers that you've just given, Phil. So when it comes to the draft, are you best player available, or are you the best fit for the team camp?
I'm always best player available. The draft is literally just, can you guess better than anyone else? Nobody really knows if any of these guys are going to pan out. Like, sure, there's generational guys that are just so good that they bowl over anything in their way and any impediments in their way. But at the end of the day, like, your job in these drafts is get the best player that you can get. Get the guy who's going to contribute and help your team the most. Especially when you're drafting at the very top of the draft, you cannot overthink it. That's how you end up, picking Sean Bradley over Penny Hardaway, to be frank. That's how you end up making mistakes, is you overthink the top of the draft. At the end of the day, especially with the way the NBA is going now, talent is more important than position. You can make players fit together. You can get creative. There's no orthodoxy to how to play. Like, sure, you need a big to help rebound. You need certain things. And certainly when you get to the playoffs, it becomes about matchups. But at the end of the day, talent wins. The State Warriors have built an entire legacy on just destroying teams with their 3-point shooting. Use Draymond Green as a free safety at center for a lot of their lineups. They flipped their first title because they put Draymond Green at center, and everyone thought that was crazy, but it worked. And so the fit is really more about, how do we make these puzzle pieces fit together? And obviously where the Magic are at right now, look, I know some people hate me for saying this, but you are what your record says you are. This was a 22-win team last year. They're going to get better just from internal improvement. They're going to get better by adding a high-level prospect in this draft. But there's still a lot of work that this team needs to do. This team needs to find ways to get better. And when you're that low in the standings, you need everything. You're not tied to anything. Like, yes, Wendell Carter's a nice player. Franz Wagner's a nice player. There's a lot of things to like about Marco Fultz. I'm not saying they should give up on any of these guys, panic, and make all these crazy trades, but they need to be focused on, okay, what kind of team are we trying to build? How can we shape this team into what we want to shape it in? And then figure out the fits around the players that are kind of holding the thing up. And I think right now we're at the stage of, let's find the players that are going to be the tent poles for this team moving forward, and then move on from there.
Okay, so from that position though, taking the best guy available, who are you taking? Assuming we keep the number 1 pick.
Yeah, no. This more often than not, I'm taking Jabari Smith. I think that he's got the highest floor. Again, that's not a reason to pick a guy, but I think he's not only got the highest floor, I do think he has one of the higher ceilings of this group. I think that his 3-point shooting is super valuable. That's obviously something the Magic are missing. I think his defensive versatility is super valuable. The fact that he is already, not that Chet Holmgren's a bad defender. Chet Holmgren's a really good defender. But the fact that Jabari Smith is already seems like he'll be a pretty high level defender, potential all defensive team player. That's hard to find. That tells me a lot more about his mindset than anything else. I was talking with Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, and he said, this guy just wants to work. This guy just wants to get better. He believes he will be the best player. And that's obviously, he's an Auburn guy. He's going to back his guy. I was
going to say that.
But you want to hear that. And I think that, Jabari Smith can get there. I think the questions about his ability to create off the dribble, certainly it's going to be a struggle. Certainly it's something he's going to have to get better at and create separation, but he's just so big that I think that he will figure it out. I think that he has all the makings to be that kind of a player. And if he hits, he's going to be really, really good. And if he doesn't quite hit there, he's still going to be really good. He's still going to be a Rashard Lewis type, who's again, multiple time All-Star, a foundational player for a championship team. So I think that Jabari Smith kind of checks all the boxes that I like here with this pick. More often than not, that's where I land. Like you guys, I do change hourly sometimes. But I tend to land on Jabari here.
I think what we're saying there is, for me, I've still not watched an awful lot yet. I've got to get around and sit down and watch these guys properly. But I'm more angling towards Banchero or Smith. But I'm not going to cry if we end up with Chet, because let's be fair.
No, don't.
As we said earlier on, there's a reason that we're debating the three. And it's that they've all got qualities. So if we end up picking, whoever we end up picking, for me, there's no point. No, we should have gone with this. We should have gone with that. Because everybody can, as we've said, with the power of hindsight, there's plenty looking at Jordan Poole saying, why didn't we pick him? What was it? 14 teams passed on him. 14 teams passed on him. We can.
Everybody missed on Jordan Poole. He was in the G League for a while.
Yeah.
It's, I look at it as we've got to go with what we get. And those three prospects, all from what I'm reading and seeing, and I say I've not gone into it deeply yet, have huge upsides. So I'm not going to cry whoever we get.
Who's your pick, Gary? You changed this week?
Today.
I'll probably still Chet. I just think on upside and what he could be, and I keep going back to that feeling I had before the Dwight Okafor draft, and back in the day, I remember there was a lot of people going for Okafor, and I just thought if Dwight hits, his upside's crazy, and I think if Chet hits, he's above the other two. So I'm right now, but it's easy for me to say when I'm not standing there saying that, make the call, it's easy for me to say. So it's Chet right now, but it does change a lot.
I'm going to throw it back to you then, Mikey.
I don't know. I feel a little bit more confident this week. I've said Chet, I think, was who the Magic would go for the last few weeks, but Jabari's been my pick. But I feel like he's maybe starting to separate himself a little bit in my head. Whether that's actually true, I don't know. But no, obviously last week we talked about Chet's frame, Phil. I know that's a big red flag, a big question mark for a lot of people. And I've been a personal trainer for the last 15, 16 years. And I was trying to explain to people last week why I'm worried about Chet's frame, not as a player, not as a skill level or his ability. He's got the frame of a person who is always going to struggle putting on weight. And obviously you don't want him to put on so much weight where it affects his ability on the floor. But I found pictures of his dad online, and if you look at his frame, because guys tend to mirror what their dad's frame was like, what their body type was like, and his dad's the same build. He's got narrow shoulders. He's very, very not fragile looking necessarily, but he's very slim. And people compare it to like Kevin Durant as a rookie, Kevin Garnett as a rookie, these guys that come into the league with small frames. But Chet's still like 14, 15, 20 pounds lighter than these guys were in their rookie season. So there's going to be a ceiling on how much weight and strength he can actually build, which worries me. Does it worry you as well?
I mean, it worries me in a lot of ways, because there's the whiplash of all the injuries the Magic have had the last few years. So I think there is, injuries are random. I don't think you can plan for them, but I've compared Chet a lot to Kristaps Porzingis, and Kristaps has had a ton of injury issues. Now, obviously, the ACL was something separate, and I think he's had a lot of issues kind of branching off of that original ACL tear. But it's definitely concerning. I think the Magic are probably better equipped to ease Chet in and help him and kind of hide those deficiencies. I think that having a center like Wendell Carter next to him, I've kind of joked around with people that my conspiracy theory for the year was that the Magic played Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter together as a kind of proof of concept for playing Chet and Wendell together. And there's some success there. There's no doubt there's some success there. I think that I think that Chet can, obviously you can put on some functional strength. He's going to be in an NBA weight training program. He's going to have the best, kind of health scientists that the Magic can hire to kind of help out with that and figure out a way to get him strong, keep his mobility, keep him healthy, get him through an 82 game season. But I do think ultimately, you're going to run into some problems. You're going to run into some issues. You watch, there were a lot more teams playing two bigs in the playoffs and throughout the season this year, but and I think that Chet can hold his own on the perimeter and hold his own on the floor. But, you're going to eventually run into that problem. Like, we can't have two centers on the floor. And so you're facing Philadelphia in a second round series. They're going small. They got Tobias Harris out there. Can you really have Chet Holmgren defending Tobias Harris? You're going to eventually need him to play center. He's going to have to play his size. And I give Chet a ton of credit. I know some people are a little gun shy about Chet because, the last kind of gangly center the Magic drafted was Mo Bamba, and Mo Bamba, as good as he was this year, as much as he kind of recovered a lot of his value this year, he was a struggle with him, and he struggled with injuries. Chet is not Mo Bamba play style wise. Chet likes to take a bump. He will take a hit. He will try and dish out some punishment, some physical punishment too. And I love that he's not afraid like that. Yeah. But I think that also is going to lead to some problems. I think as fun and exciting as these unicorns are, there's always going to be that question of the human body was not meant to move that way when it's that big. I think a lot of these big guys have these kind of recurring injuries because just the physics and biology of it sometimes doesn't work. That's not to say the Magic should take Chet off their board or not consider him. If there is a generational talent in this draft, it's Chet Holmgren. There are just not 7-footers that move with his fluidity. I don't think we saw everything that Chet has to offer at Gonzaga. Gonzaga had a paint-bound center and Drew Timme, who's a better college player than Chet Holmgren is. And so Chet had to play a role. He wasn't the star of that team. He was playing a role. And some of the guards that Gonzaga had were really rough. Just their shooting was just not good either. And so they needed Chet to help space the floor a little bit to help that team win. Chet can do a lot more. And so there is that potential of, okay, if this guy really is that high upside, again, take the best player available. If you think he could be the best player, you take him and you start and you understand the risk. You understand what you're going to have to do to get him ready to play or get him ready to get through a season or what you may have to deal with over the course of time. But you invest in the guy that you believe in at the end of the day. And there's plenty of reason to believe in Chet. Again, there's just not many 7-footers who move with his fluidity. Don't necessarily watch his Gonzaga tape. There's some really good clips from his Gonzaga days. Watch his tape in high school, in the AAU circuit especially. He has taken the ball off the glass on a rebound and going full court, stopping and nailing threes. He's doing behind the back dribble moves to get past perimeter players and get to the basket. He has a lot of tools in his bag that I don't think he showed at Gonzaga. And figuring out, okay, what are the pros and cons? Can we overcome this hurdle of the potential injury risk, which, again, I think is there. I think it's fair to debate that and fair to see that. Can we overcome that risk to get him to the level that he can fulfill all that potential that he seems to have?
So at the moment, we have no idea which way the Magic are going to go. And we probably have no idea about the second round either, because they've got a history of trading away second round picks. But looking at the early second round, obviously the Magic have got number 32 and 35. What do you think Orlando's strategy should be with those two picks? When you consider the Magic already have 8 players under the age of 25, that doesn't include bringing back Mo Bamba and Bol Bol. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think the first thing the Magic, if I were the Magic, one of the things that I would be trying to do is I would be trying to package either both of those picks or one of those picks with Terrence Ross to move back up into the first round. Start to consolidating with these draft picks a little bit. Yeah. Terrence Ross has obviously kind of made it clear that he would like to be playing somewhere else, wants to play for a contender, just doesn't want to be part of a rebuild, which is perfectly understandable. I think most Magic fans agree with him on that front. And so trying to find a good trade partner, trying to find a home for Terrence Ross, I think is one of the big priorities for the offseason. So I would try and do that in this draft. Now, trying to figure out which player I would target if I'm the Magic is a little bit trickier. This is the quality of this draft class, especially for what the Magic need, shooting number one, drops off pretty quickly after about I would honestly say pick 9 or 10. From 11 to 11 all the way down to like 33. You're really splitting hairs. It's going to be a really unpredictable draft night. I do think we'll see a lot of trades, if not on draft night, throughout the course of the season because of the free agency, because of how narrow the free the free agent class is. So if I'm the Magic, I have a couple, maybe 3 or 4 guys that I'm really comfortable taking in the late teens or early 20s, and just going in on that guy, going in on that player. It could be Nikola Jovic. It could be, yes, there's a player named Nikola Jovic in this draft with a V. It could be Bryce McGowan's from Nebraska. It could be Jalen Williams from Santa Clara. It could be Jalen Williams from Arkansas. There are 2 Jalen Williams in this draft. They're spelled differently. It could be Jalen Williams from Arkansas. It could be Ismail Kamagate from Spain, or Khalifa Diop, who I believe was also in for a workout and interview earlier this week in Orlando. The Magic, I think, need to like find the guys that they're really interested in, and just target a playoff team that doesn't need a draft pick, that doesn't need a first round pick, doesn't need that guaranteed salary, and try and trade back into this first round and just take your guy. Again, it doesn't have to be conventional thinking at that point. Just grab a guy that's going to help your roster and fill a need. I think the Magic need a backup center really badly. I think the Magic need some wing depth, and they need a veteran. So if you can get a veteran back for Terrence Ross and a draft pick that fills a need, I think that would be a really good step to take here in the back end of this draft.
You think T. Ross will make it to opening night then, or do you think it could happen on draft night?
I think that Terrence Ross will be traded before the season. I don't think he starts the season in Orlando. Whether it happens on draft night, I think is a question. We're doing the Locked On Ultimate Mock Draft right now, where we do trades. I have been trying to shop Terrence Ross to every playoff team in the 20s, and he had a really rough season, and 2 second-round picks, 2 high-level second-round picks isn't being enough to trade in. Orlando has a ton of cap room this offseason, so I think that what the Magic are going to do with their cap room is they're going to look to get involved in some of these trades, and they're going to use Terrence Ross as a vehicle to make trades happen, but they're also going to use their cap room to make trades happen too. This is not a good free agent class. The Magic have, I think, roughly $30 million of cap space to spend this offseason. The pickings for the Magic, for what the Magic need, are frankly pretty slim. And I think that you're going to find it very difficult to convince some of these veteran free agents to come to Orlando and kind of stick it out with the rebuilding team for a little while. I think the Magic need to kind of prove that they're ready to win, and ready to win at a bigger level before they can really play free agency. And so since it's a tight free agent market, since there aren't a lot of free agents out there and there's not a lot of teams with money, I do expect a pretty active trade market. There's obviously a lot of teams that need to get better and a lot of teams that want to make splashes. And I'm sure, again, I know we talked about this before we started recording. Next year's draft is pretty good. So I think there's going to be some teams that are going to be willing to kind of hit the reset button pretty early on this if they don't feel like they're a playoff team or a playoff contender, or they're just spinning their wheels, and they'll be just like, this is the draft to kind of push our chips in a little bit. So I think we'll see a lot of trades. And I think the Magic can be a third team in a lot of those trades where they move Terrence Ross to a playoff team. They take on, they get some extra draft picks for the future. They take on some bad salary in the present and add to their roster that way. I think that's going to be part of the Magic strategy this offseason, is really working the phones to to be a facilitator for a lot of these trades in what is a very tight market.
It makes sense. Makes total sense.
You've already named a couple of the players that you've kind of quite like in the second round. Assuming we keep one or both those picks, what is it about any of those particular players that you like?
Yeah, some of it is just positional need. Like I look at this Magic roster, and one of the problems that I see is you just can't play everybody. You do get to a certain point of the draft where positional need does matter. And because you want to draft, again, not that you want to take a player that you don't think is as talented as anyone else, but you also want to take players that will have a pathway to play. You want to make sure that you're picking someone that's actually going to contribute to your roster and actually do something. And you look at this Magic roster, everyone's mentioned that it's already super young, which is a concern for me as well. But they're pretty full at almost every position. The only 2 positions that are really of need are, I think they need one more wing, especially a shooting wing if they can find one. And they need a backup center. Again, their center rotation right now is Wendell Carter, Mo Wagner. Mo Bamba's still hanging around out there. I think there's still a chance that the Magic re-sign him, but and that would fill that need, obviously. But I do think that the Magic need to find some backup center help. So, I look at a guy like Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams from Arkansas would be a really good backup center in this league. I think he led the nation among centers and charges. He's just a defense. He's just kind of flying around defensively. He really gave Chet Holmgren a lot of fits in that NCAA tournament game. I was able to get him into foul trouble. Not going to add a lot of offensive skill, but he's just flying around defensively, just plays with a ton of energy. And that's obviously fits the culture the Magic want. And that's obviously going to help you kind of make a name for yourself in the league. That's how Robert Williams kind of established himself in the league. And obviously he found a really good fit for him that really gave him a narrowly defined role where he could really succeed. That's the kind of player that a Jalen Williams is. Guy like I haven't watched a ton of Ismail Kamagate or Khalifa Diop yet, but those guys are, good shot blockers. They're just kind of big bodies. You may not be able to move them around much on the perimeter, but they'll fill the needs you typically like from a backup center, just a rim protector to kind of fill those minutes on the back end of the lineup. I think Jalen Williams from the Santa Clara version, I think he's probably played his way into the first round. So I don't think he'll be there in the second round, but he's a really interesting point guard prospect or guard prospect. I think he can play both guard positions. He did measure with I think it was the second or third longest wingspan among non-centers at the NBA draft combine. So that checks that box. So I think that he's got a lot of really interesting skills. I think his 3-point shot's improving, but he's really good at getting into the paint. And so there are some guys that I really like. If they want to take a little bit of a swing, they can maybe go after one of the G League Ignite guys. Jaden Hardy at one point was considered a surefire lottery pick. He really struggled this year in the G League with the minutes that he got. Was not a particularly good shooter, really kind of struggled in the paint, but he's super, super talented. There's a reason those guys are at the G League Ignite. Marjon Beauchamp would also be an option there as well, someone who went to the G League Ignite program as well. So there are plenty of options. It's just figuring out what you like, what you're willing to invest in. And if you're going to trade up, you're trading up to get a guy you really, really like. You don't just trade up just to trade up. Those trades don't get consummated till you know who you're picking at that spot. If you're trading up, you trade up to get a guy that you really, really like. And so there are a few guys that have piqued my interest that I need to watch a little bit more tape on. I'll perfectly admit that. I've been focused on the top of the draft. But there are players out there, as weak as people may say this draft class is, someone's going to emerge. 30 guys don't just disappear so quickly. So someone's going to emerge as a quality role player here.
Well, based off of history, I don't think we're going to be using both picks in the second round. I think one's getting traded at least. Phil, you kind of already touched on free agency. Obviously, the Magic have got Gary Harris and Robin Lopez hitting unrestricted free agency and Mo Bamba and Bol Bol restricted. What would you like to see the Magic do in free agency? For me, I think Gary Harris would be a veteran that's definitely worth bringing in. I think he done good things last season. I think the young players really like him. The same with Robin Lopez. Would you be happy seeing them come back next season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can bring everybody back. I think again, people hate me for saying this. This was still a 22-win team last year. Like yes, there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be positive about, but there's a lot that this team needs to improve on. And I agree with everyone that, one of the criticisms I have of Jeff Weltman was in 2019, they ran the same roster back and they kind of spun their wheels a little bit in 2020. Yes, they added Markelle Fulton. That was a big boost, but they really struggled in 2020 and they kind of topped off. You can't stand still in this league. If you're standing still, you're falling behind. So you do have to kind of find ways to push this team forward. Having said that, I think Gary Harris would be a great player to bring back. I would absolutely be willing to bring him back. I think he fills a ton of needs that this Magic team has. He's a good worker, was a good veteran for this team. Like you said, I think that bringing him back would be a really, really good step. Looking at the list of centers, unless a trade develops, I think that bringing back Mo Bamba might ultimately be the best option. One thing the Magic don't have on their books right now are kind of mid-tier contracts. If you're starting to kind of start playing chess with this a little bit here, you look at the trades that bring in stars. you got to be able to kind of move mid-tier contracts along with your kind of big salary guys that you're trading. If you're looking to make trades, you need contracts at the top end of the scale. You need contracts in the middle end of the scale. You need contracts at the bottom end of the scale. This is a problem that the Boston Celtics had for a little while, where they were really kind of top heavy with a lot of their contracts. They didn't have any of those mid-tier contracts to go add a guy that would help them push to the playoffs. And that was one thing that they did this year. Boston's not in the NBA Finals right now without making that trade for Derek White. So you need kind of these mid-level contracts too. And so, again, in that $9 to $12 million range right now, the only one of those that the Magic have, Wendell Carter, to some extent, they're not trading him. Terrence Ross, is kind of that level. He's getting paid, I think, 11.5 or 11.25 next year. If you could get Mo Bamba back on 8, 9, 10, maybe I'd go up to 11. Kind of a 3-year deal, 3-year 33 or 4-year 44, somewhere in that range. I don't think you're necessarily doing terribly on that front. Obviously, something you got to be worried about is Mo's probably going to be coming off the bench. The Magic are probably going to be starting whoever they draft alongside Wendell Carter. So you're paying that premium for a backup that you're hoping to move around. But again, I think back to 2009, like one of the reasons why the Magic re-signed Marcin Gortat, they signed Brendan Bass, they added all these players. It was not just because they could. It was because that would enable them to make trades if they needed to dump or bail ship, or make any move down the line to improve their roster. And obviously, they made the wrong trade with that. I think they panicked and made a bad trade with all those assets, and they eventually traded away all those assets for nothing. But the point I always make about that is, okay, you just want to be in position to make those trades. And again, like I think I said this after the 19 season. When people were talking about maybe trading Aaron Gordon for Russell Westbrook, was like, I don't think that's the deal that I would do, but being able to say the Magic can make that kind of a deal, that's a good thing. That's where you want this team to be. And you hope that another year in the playoffs would enable you to go out and make that trade to kind of push this team to the next level. Obviously that didn't happen. And I think there's fair criticism to make about that as well. So I think this is really a summer, where the Magic are going to use their cap room strategically. It's not necessarily going to be done, or they're not necessarily going to use their space this year to make this year's roster. I mean, they'll make this year's roster better, but it's not necessarily about making the final product better. It's about setting up the chessboard a little bit to be able to take that next step or be able to move quickly if the team outpaces expectation, if the team suddenly looks a lot better than maybe we all think. So it's going to be an interesting summer. I don't know what to predict. Obviously I don't know. It's hard to say what trades are going to happen and what teams are going to be looking for, but there's going to be a lot of action this offseason. I think I don't think it's going to be a quiet offseason for Orlando.
We've obviously seen on Twitter and Instagram, I think it was Orlando Magic Daily being quoted, which was, we saw the response of saying this is nothing to do with us, we absolute fake for Zion Williamson trading the number 1 pick. There's one on Bleacher Report I think is quite interesting, that the Magic deal with Toronto in free agency and take a run at getting OG in from them. The suggestion is that we sign and trade Mo Bamba, Chuma, and our 2023 first round Chicago pick. Would that be the sort of thing that would interest you?
Yeah, potentially for sure. I think an idea that I've had for this roster is, I've kind of like the idea that I've had and what I'd like to see the Magic do with some of this cap room is go find their Gordon Hayward. One thing that I like that Charlotte did, they pushed in a little bit too much. I think the Terry Rozier contract was a little rich. I know Magic fans wanted to grab Terry Rozier at that time too. And I was just like, I don't see it. Again, he's very good. And I think he'd help this team a lot. But one thing I really liked that Charlotte did was they acquired Gordon Hayward. They knew he was on a bad contract, but they just wanted a veteran guy. They just wanted a veteran player who could score and kind of stabilize the team while the young guys developed. Obviously, injuries have kind of derailed that idea, but I really think that LaMelo Ball obviously pushed that team to a new level, but Gordon Hayward, I think, really proved when he's healthy to be a really kind of stabilizing force for that team and help make that team better. The idea that I've kind of been toying around with is kind of like that. You go find a guy that can get you 20 a night now and can kind of make your team competitive every night. while allowing young players beneath him or around him to play roles and kind of develop more slowly. There's going to be times where they're going to have to be pushed to the fore. There's going to be times where they're going to be bursting a little bit, and you let that ride, but you still have that kind of veteran consistency that you can rely on night in and night out. And then eventually, you overpay for him. You're overpaying for him a little bit, but toward the back end of his contract, he's perfectly capable of playing a role when those young guys take over. Like Gordon Hayward is not the best player on Charlotte anymore. When he signed with Charlotte, he was their best player. He was their leading scorer. Now now when he's healthy, at least he takes that back seat. There's other guys out there scoring, but he's still there spacing the floor, doing what he does, just at kind of at a lower scale. And he's still helping that team win when he plays. That's kind of where I think the Magic are at. I have toyed with the idea, and I think the Magic should 100% do this, even if it's a fool's errand. Go get a meeting with Zach LaVine. Like, I don't think the Magic should sign Zach LaVine, but they have the money to go sign a max guy. Like, if you sign Zach LaVine, you're immediately a playoff team. That would be the best score the Magic have had. That'd be the best pure score the Magic have had since Tracy McGrady. The thing with him though is you'd go to him and say, hey, look, you're going to be carrying the load, doing what you've been doing in Chicago, doing what you were doing in Minnesota, the first 2 years of this 4-year deal. By the back half of that 4-year deal, our guys will be ready. And you're going to help bring these guys along. You'll have Franz Wagner, who's ready to score. You'll have whoever we draft with the number 1 pick, Jabari Smith, Paolo, Banchero, Chet, Holmgren. You'll have that guy who's ready to carry the load. You've worked with Wendell Carter. You know how good Wendell Carter can be. You'll have the pieces around you to be a really competitive team, and will be able to kind of ease your load, and you won't have to carry this team as much on the back half of that contract. Now, if I'm Zach LaVine, I'm not leaving Chicago unless I'm going to a playoff contender. I'm not leaving Chicago for a rebuilding situation. Like that would be, if he did that, that'd be crazy. And I think there's real concerns about the knee issue and the knee injury, where he wouldn't be able to kind of carry this team in the way that I'm proposing early on in his career. You'd be pushing a lot of chips into the middle of the table. So I'm not saying that the Magic should do that, but 100% go get that meeting. Go get in the room with a top free agent. You have the money to throw around. I wouldn't do this for Miles Bridges. I wouldn't do this, for maybe you do it for Kyrie Irving. I don't really want to deal with that. As friendly as the state of Florida might be to Kyrie Irving here, but I don't think that would be good for the team's culture. Go throw your money around. Go show that, hey, we're serious. We're really serious about making this team better, and trying to get in the room with these guys. If anything, you'll build a relationship with the agent for the next guy that he has that's gonna hit the market, or you'll prove to the rest of the league that, hey, we're serious about getting better. We believe our team is ready for this responsibility. And I think that can be a powerful message sent to the league as well. So, again, I don't know who that player is. It's probably someone that they grab in a trade. It's probably someone that we don't really expect or aren't super excited about. I've thrown the idea about TJ Warren around. I think coming off the foot injury, that probably wouldn't be a good idea either. But there's a guy out there, there's a veteran out there that can give this team the stability to make them a play-in tournament team very, very quickly, but can then take a step back when the young guys are ready to take over. And that's kind of the dream that I have for this year's free agency.
Yeah.
You just imagine the Bulls fans if we signed LaVine and then
some major 3D chess there, major 3D chess.
That's awesome. But it's kind of what you said about the trade scenario when we looked a few years ago about Aaron Gordon for somebody for trading for Russell Westbrook. You're just putting yourself in that conversation, aren't you? You're just putting yourself in that position to get better, which is the important thing. Obviously, it's going to be a massive few weeks for the Magic. We're hosting another watch party for the NBA draft, as we did a few weeks ago for the lottery on Thursday, the 23rd of June. It was technically Friday morning for us. So
at least you won't be up that late.
Well, I'm sure there'll be one or two that be interested to see what we do with those second round picks and trade up for the Kings for number 4, because that's the sort of thing the Kings would do, I think. But we're hosting another watch party on Zoom. So if you are not going to the Amway Centre and you'd like to join us, chat Magic basketball, have a few drinks and watch the draft unfold, you can visit our website, orlandomagicuk.com/events, and you can fill in the form there and sign up for our watch party. All the descriptions will be in the podcast as well. Phil, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you jumping back on. It's been a while, and hopefully we'll get to catch up with you in October when we're all over.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to do that.
Did you want to plug your credentials for everybody listening?
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't already listen, my podcast is Locked On Magic. We've been really busy this week. I spoke with Locked On Auburn's Zach Blackerby. I spoke with Locked On Gonzaga's Andy Patton. Monday we'll be doing an episode with Locked On Duke's I'm blanking on his name. I apologize, JJ. I know his first name is JJ. We'll be doing a podcast on Paolo Banchero. So we're getting the lowdown on all of the top prospects from people who watch them every day. That's actually a question I'm asking everyone is what's something that you notice about this player, watching him day to day that we wouldn't notice if we're just dropping in. So if you want to learn more about these top prospects, these podcasts are going to be really, really, really helpful for you guys. So they're throughout the week. You can go to Locked On Magic wherever you download podcasts. We're also on YouTube as well. So subscribe there. You can follow my writing at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. And of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD, as well as at OMagicDaily. I'm very, very responsive. I will always talk to you guys. If you have a question, I will usually always answer. So definitely drop me a line.
I always smile when Phil reels that off because I've heard that hundreds of times. It's brilliant. It's very good. Well, thank you as always for listening and watching. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Orlando Magic UK. So from Gary, Paul, Philip, and myself, until next week, go Magic.